Thank you for listening to this episode of the Special Fathers Network bi-weekly Dad's Zoom call. Tonight's topic is grieving the life anticipated. That could be your life, it could be the life of your child, it could be your family's life, it could be from a whole host of different situations. Ordinarily, a family who has a child with special needs, it comes from disability or perhaps disease or injury, but the loss could be of a spouse or a child or a loved one. And it could even be something like divorce. And it's not limited to the items that I've mentioned, but there are a lot of different reasons to be grieving the life anticipated. And you often hear that there are different stages for grieving. I've seen it more often than not that there's 5 or 7 stages of grieving. And when I think about grieving, I don't know that it fits into 5 or 7 buckets very conveniently, but I think about the concept of denial, which might be shock or fear or numbness. It could be anger, blame, or bargaining. It could be pain or guilt for that matter, depression, reflection, loneliness. And then at the end, if you get to the end, and not everybody does, it's with hope and some acceptance. So what I'd like to do is emphasize that every one of us human beings grieves differently. And I think we just have to come to the understanding that there has to be some grace involved. And if you're married, recognize that your spouse is not necessarily going to grieve within the same time frame or maybe in the same order, right? If there's different stages of grief, and we have to allow each other some space, right? So that we're not being judgmental or adding any extra anxiety to the situation. So we're blessed to have a number of individuals that have been involved with the organization. And I'd like each of you, as I call on you, to make a brief self-introduction, what your connection to the Special Fathers Network or 21st Century Dads Foundation is. And if you have a child with disability, please mention that. And I have a series of questions that I've prepared, and we'll just go round robin. We'll try to keep the order the same to keep it simple. So, starting with the dads with the lowest number of podcasts, I believe Scott Sowers, you, podcast dad number 9, will go first.
Hello, guys. I'm Scott Sowers. I live in Lilburn, Georgia, northeast of Atlanta. I have a 33-year-old daughter that's autistic and developmentally delayed. She's awesome. I think I met David, 5 years ago or something like that. It was a long time ago when we did a bike-a-thon or whatever they call it, fundraiser. Here he came out. I'm with the St. John Newman Church. I chair the special need ministry there. Podcast 9, like he said, and just really enjoy this. I think we're doing great things, and I've seen it. It's fun to watch it grow, and it is definitely growing. So that's about it right now.
Scott, thanks for being with us. John Felageller, podcast dad number 65. You're up.
Good evening. Thank you. And yes, proud podcast dad number 65, John Felageller. I'm coming to you from lovely Highwood, Illinois, in the northern suburbs of Chicago. I have one son with autism, Christopher, who's 13, autistic nonverbal, and is in 7th grade. By profession, I'm a special education teacher in Chicago, but I do a variety of advocacy work otherwise with many organizations locally and around the country, blogging, speaking, podcasting, you name it. I've been involved with Special Fathers Network for a few years now. And just from, kind of the grassroots on up, especially being involved in building the yearly conferences, the annual conferences, and the 3rd one will be coming up, and we're very excited about that. So just great to be a part of this wonderful team.
John, glad you could join us. Joe Lofino, podcast dad number 95. You're up.
All right. Yes, great to be here. My name's Joe. I'm from Ohio. I work as a custom cabinet carpenter and definitely over full-time dad. I've got 2 children, Joshua and Joanna. Joshua's 4, Joanna's 3, and they were both diagnosed with Fragile X syndrome, full mutation, back in 2019. And that's when I went around searching on Apple Podcasts for father mentoring and something along those lines, and then the podcast popped up and we got in touch through that. So great to be here.
Joe, glad you could join us. Jeff Johnson, who will be podcast number 155 when it's produced sometime later this year. You're up.
Thanks, David. I'm also very happy to be here. My name is Jeff Johnson. I live in Anderson, South Carolina, but grew up in Elgin, Illinois, so I'm familiar with where some of you fellows are from. My son, Daniel, who is 23, was born with a neural tube defect called an encephalocele. So very similar to spina bifida, but everything kind of happens in the head and skull rather than the back. So he is profoundly disabled. David called me while I was standing in line to vote a few months ago. And I think we talked for about an hour and a half on the phone, and it was a great conversation. And that's been my introduction to this group. So I'm very excited to be part of the group, and really enjoying the Zoom calls. So glad to be here. Thank you.
Jeff, glad you could join us. Tony, you're up next.
Tony Brescia here, calling from the Schaumburg, Hoffman Estates area, northwest suburbs of Chicago. Alex is, how old is he? He's 29, soon to be 30. He has a disease called tuberous sclerosis, which is the #1 genetic cause of autism. So he's got a few of those tendencies in there. He's hemiplegic on his left side. He has a hard time, can't move his left arm, hard time moving his left leg, but he gets around, he moves, things are good. Stumbled around David a couple of years ago at the first conference meeting, and ever since then kind of been popping in and out as I can.
And we're happy to have you popping in and popping out. Better that you're popping in as opposed to popping out. But glad you could join us tonight. Eric, you're up next. And I remember exactly where I met you, but I'm not going to say where, but I'll just give John Ebersole credit for introducing us. You're up.
John Ebersole introduced us. I think we met in a bathroom, I want to say, or if it wasn't in a bathroom, it was right outside the bathroom, but at a Johnny and Friends event about 3-ish years ago. John, for those who don't know, he was executive director there for about 20 years. We lived 3 houses away from each other in Oak Park, just west of Chicago. I've got 3 kids, 3-year-old, 7-year-old boy who are both neurotypical kiddos, and then 9-year-old daughter who is on the autism spectrum, ADHD, anxiety disorder, and I will leave it at that.
Eric, thanks for joining us. And Randy Crook, I'd like you to introduce yourself.
Randy Crook. I live in Fox River Grove, Illinois. I met David, I think 5 or 6 years ago. He did a presentation at a Knights of Columbus thing that Holy Family had on the Dad's Network after he had bicycled around the world, I think. And very impressive. He was handing out his dad's coins, which I acquired quite a few and passed them on to worthy gentlemen that I had been acquainted with. And so that's how I've met David. And obviously, I think a great deal of what he does with the Dad's Network. And I sign on here because I always learn something. So thank you for all you do, all of you, and for sharing.
Randy, glad you could be with us. And looks like I overlooked somebody, Jim Elliott, who's podcast ad number 4, right at the very beginning. And we had a unique encounter because I presented Jim with his coin, if he remembers, underwater. We were actually scuba diving in Cozumel, Mexico. Jim, you're up. Just making a brief self-introduction now.
Your daughter and you came on a trip with us and saw what we do with individuals with disabilities and zero gravity, and it must have made an impression on you because you decided to interview me, and for better or worse. And it changed my life, obviously, and it inspired me to go on and leave a successful career in the media business to start Dive Heart. And I don't draw a salary. I donate all my training and come back to Dive Heart. And I just kind of, like today, just kind of focus on getting the word out there, creating awareness for parents who have children with disabilities, or loved ones with disabilities, whether it's veterans or family members or whatever. And that's pretty much what I do. We're at 501c3 in Downers Grove, and that's kind of it.
Do you want to mention that you have two daughters that had some challenges or have some challenges?
Well, yeah, I mean, I've had my whole life. My dad was a disabled Army vet. My best friend had cerebral palsy, and I walked him to school so he didn't get beat up. I raised 4 kids with disabilities. My 2 daughters, natural daughters, were blind, and one had spinal cord issues. My ex's oldest son, he took me through all sorts of cognitive and mental issues, mental illness issues. And I went through tough love. I went through with him and drug rehab and prison, and now he's dead. And my youngest son was in the hospital every quarter with asthma and allergies and all sorts of crazy stuff when I was in my 20s. I had 4 kids at 24, and it was, I thought that was natural. Which was like, really? Now I look back, I go, oh my God, I look at 24-year-olds now and go, seriously? Okay. Anyway, I thought anything was possible. So,
Jim, I'm glad you could be with us. Thanks for joining us.
thanks.
So I'm going to go round robin. We'll stick with the same order that we've made the self-introductions. And the first question I'd like each of you to address has to do with, what life did you anticipate, and what was it that caused you to take a turn or to have to pivot? So I'm going to go to you, Scott Sowers, first.
Oh, what life did I anticipate? Well, I have an older daughter, an oldest daughter, who is typical. And when she was born, we moved to Georgia from California. Sharon and I did. We had our first child, and I got a job in a company. I got a job. I was doing everything, and I come from a family of 8 children, and none of my brothers and sisters have any disabled or special needs children. But I didn't. I had some contact with special needs as a child. I hate to say it, but there was a doctor that had a special needs son at the swim club that came every day, and his mean little kids, we used to make fun, not at him, but we used to make fun of him and stuff. And that was, as I got older, I really regretted that. That's a long story, but I just expected a typical lifestyle, have 2 kids or have children, raise a family, and so on and so forth. But then when Gloria was born, she looked fine. She looked good, typical, but she wasn't hitting her milestones. We all have the milestones we hit on the big switchboard, and she would sit there and just kind of fall over. She wouldn't crawl. She took forever to crawl, and we knew something was going on probably 6 months, a year in, maybe. It took maybe longer. I don't know. It took a while because we probably were in denial. But then we finally took her to some doctors, and they ran us through all the tests. And it's really funny because, it's really strange because if you have a typical child that falls down and hurts themselves, you're not thinking about yourself, and you're not thinking about what's going to happen down the road. You just do what you got to do to get them better. And with Gloria, we took her around to I never really even thought about, oh, why me, or all that and this and that. We just were trying to find answers, trying to get questions answered. And even when we found out, we had a DO that was such a great guy, and he was crazy. But he told us, they did the tests, they took muscle biopsies, they did all this, they kept taking things and marking things off. And he told us, he said, look, she's mildly mentally retarded. She's autistic. I think she's got autism in there, and she's developmentally delayed. So she's going to be whatever she's going to be. And you just need to do all you can for her, help her, teach her, just support her in everything you do. But she's going to be what she's going to be. And my wife took it really well. I kind of kept looking for, as men do, I'm going to solve the problem. And I guess that's when I finally went into denial and thought, this is crazy, and accepted it, and we ran with it, and I had fantastic support from family, still do. One of my nieces has a special needs child, and I'm trying to get her husband to join us, but he has Duke 15, something like that. It's really, really intense. And you see that happen and you think, God, I know where you are. But did that change our life? Yeah, it did. But we've come the long story. The long of it is, who are we to second guess what God does? And Gloria is a wonderful kid. She's so funny. She's 33 years old. She can't read or write. She does, but not, she can't. She has short-term memory. It's horrible. But we love her dearly. But it did change our lives because she's with us 24/7. We can't leave her at home and go somewhere. We're not real big on having caregivers come and stay with her and we go do something. And she's just with us, and that's what it is. And our life has been like that for now 33 years. Her older sister is awesome. My family loves her. So it's really, not a bad situation, but it's to tell you that it hasn't been trying over the years. I can't tell you that it hasn't, but it is. It's been great. I mean, she's awesome. And I've got people that say, well, would you like to have, if you could make Gloria typical and she could be normal, as they say, would you want that? And I said, well, sure. I would, but not for me, but for her. But like I said, who am I to judge? God knew who she was before she was born, and it's changed our lives immensely. I think it changed mine for the better. Let's just say for the better, because it really grounded me. And there's nothing like caring for somebody else that you love. It's hard to care for somebody you don't, but it's very easy to care for somebody you love. So yeah, it was quite a change in my life, and in a good way. So
Scott, thanks for sharing and being authentic about being in denial. John Felageller, you've had what I would refer to as sort of a double whammy, not only having a son with autism, but more recently having been through a divorce. So there's at least 2 layers of grief or different grieving periods going on. So I'm wondering if you can share with us what's been most difficult for you.
Sure, thank you. And so I guess I'll just start out by saying that, yes, I am divorced as well. And, I just remember, when we were newlyweds back in 2004, we were probably the poster children for what a newlywed looks like, just wide-eyed and overflowing with all this bubbly, positive vibes and all this kind of stuff. And, we were married and happy and in love, and life was going to be easy. And, we were going to work at our careers and be successful and have kids and no problem, right? And I would tell you the first few years of our marriage, before our son came along, we had a couple of bumps, but it wasn't anything that dramatic or anything. But what's interesting is that, it's just this phenomenon of having a special needs child where, first of all, it's tough in and of itself, but it also tends to squeeze you in all of the right places, and it really just kind of exacerbates any issues that you've got underlying, under the surface in terms of, issues in the relationship or marriage or household, whatever. So, when our son came along in 2007, first of all, he was a preemie. He was 5 weeks premature. We stayed in the hospital for a week. He was chronically underweight. Very, what we just called colicky at the time, had a hard time soothing or going to sleep, and that type of stuff. Had some issues with his tummy and whatnot. And it really wasn't until, we hit the 18-month mark, where, things start to get flagged. And it's interesting. I actually did a podcast interview earlier today, and the story's fresh on my mind, so I'll share it. When we went to the pediatrician for the 18-month checkup, I remember she famously asked us, is he speaking, just asking us all the developmental questions. And we said, well, no, he's making some utterances and a couple sounds, but nothing, nothing that we consider babbling or anything that would resemble, him trying to put words together. And she said, okay, well, what you want to do is you want to go across the street. This is from her office, go across the street and go to the professional building and go see the speech therapist. And her words were, I don't know what they do, but they play with the kids and they make them talk. So go to the speech therapist and everything will get worked out. Well, lo and behold, we did that and it didn't. And then we had the hearing tested and then early intervention. And then eventually the diagnosis from the pediatric neuropsych of, at the time, pervasive developmental disorder. And now, of course, it's just autism. And the funny thing about it is this, we've been through years and years of trying almost every therapy, of doing therapy almost every day, multiple therapies every day. Him being in a very good public school district in Northbrook where, they've done a great job supporting him. The funny thing though is even with a special needs child, you still find a way to be a family, right? You still find a way to find love and great, value in your kids and in the relationship and in the marriage. And we had figured out how to do life like that. And I would tell you that we were very happy. As many challenges as we had, as many hard times, and there were some hard times, over the last 15 years or so. But it's funny. We had actually figured out, and this is just a few months before the divorce, we had actually decided to start committing to doing camping as a family. And we actually invested in an Airstream trailer. This was the summer before we got separated. So we went ahead and invested in this beautiful, shiny Airstream, gorgeous new trailer. We were going to take it everywhere. This was going to be our retirement thing and all that, and take the kid on vacation. And lo and behold, a few months later, we're separated. And now she decided she wanted the Airstream. And so she got it in the divorce settlement. So you grieve many things, including the loss of shiny new trailers. But the fact is that with divorce now, life is different in the sense that, yes, we're doing life differently. We're raising our child separately. We're doing a good job at that. But with as much work as you put into figuring out how to do life well as a family, despite your challenges, then you get that other punch in the gut. And it's like, okay, now it's going to be different again. And now you're actually going to try to do this separately, or for the most part separately. And so it is hard because you grieve what you thought would be a normal childhood for your son. And now you grieve what you thought might at least be a somewhat normal marriage and family. And now you don't have that. But, I think the biggest takeaway from all of that, though, is you find the support where you can. And I could go on and on about that, but just to just tie it up here quick. It's groups like this and guys like this and organizations like this that, help get you down the road when you have the really tough days. Friends and family are important, and certainly, guys like this. So.
John, thanks for sharing. I appreciate it. Joe, back to you. What's been the biggest challenge for you having two children with Fragile X?
Okay. Did you say the biggest challenge or like the life I anticipated? A little bit of both, I guess, huh? Well, yeah, one of the biggest challenges is seeing life change. Change is tough just in general, I guess, but the life I anticipated was definitely much different than what I'm living now. No doubt about it. The life I anticipated would be living in a big house in the city, having the kids, knowing that they'll be able to drive someday. My wife and I were talking earlier. She was envisioning dancing with Josh at his wedding. For me, it was having him drive the car, teaching him about tools, because I'm really into tools and working with my hands. Music's a huge thing for me. So being able to drum and play guitar and sing and things of that nature. And then even, when he was first diagnosed, it was like, man, will I ever hear dad? Or, mom, is he ever going to say, our names and things like things like that, being able to throw baseball with him. And and who knows about all those things? We don't know still to this day. And it's stuff that you can't really predict all the way. a lot of that at least. So, and I know we'll get there, but the life we anticipate, gosh, there's a proverb that says, like, you know, wise man makes plans for his future, but God directs his steps. And so we can sort of see that. You know, you've heard that, I'm sure, that you know, if you want to hear God laugh, tell him your plans, right? That's tongue in cheek, because I don't think God's that vindictive and like laughs at you and that sort of thing. But yeah, it's funny because, you know, I was just looking at this mug I got, all things possible. And I used to think, and it's Mark, there you go, Mark 10:27. If you look that up, you know, he's saying that it's not possible with man, but it is possible with God. Like, all things are possible with God. And so I used to see that verse as like, oh man, all right, someday maybe he'll be able to talk, and or her, you know, my daughter's really doing well and developing like crazy. So which Fragile X affects boys more than it does girls. It tends to be that way. But anyway, I used to see that verse as all things possible. You know, we can, God's in control of things. And, you know, now I'm seeing that verse as, yeah, he can change your heart also. Like, not only is he going to heal your children and things, like all things possible, seeing as that, but also all things possible being, geez, maybe my heart can change and I can see these children for who they really are, made in the image of God, you know. And so anyway, I'll get off the soapbox now. That's all I got for now.
Well, Joe, thanks for sharing, and I appreciate your insights from a religious perspective, and, you know, glad that you ended on a more serious note than God laughing at you, or us for that matter. Tony, back to you.
Okay. Wow, this is a rough one. Just thinking back to your opening remarks, David, during the last 31 years that Joelle and I have been married, we've been hit with a whole lot of pivoting points, I guess. You know, we were first married and it was great. My dad owned a company. We employed 500 people, sent, you know, 2 million pieces of mail out a day, and we were happy and things were great and we all worked together. Then my dad's evil partner came in and threw us off for a loop and did a hostile takeover, and my dad was left with nothing. And at the same time, in the middle of all that, we had Alex. Things were good, should have been good. Got a phone call 12 hours after he was born that he was having seizures, and airlifted to children's, and the odyssey starts. Got there while Joelle was recovering from her C-section, and got told, gee, he might not live to see 3 because he's having 100 seizures a day. Here he is 30. That's how much the doctors know. You know, so played that and pivot and made things better, and tried not to wallow in self-pity. And, you know, my dad gave me a piece of advice that said, you could either sit here and wallow, feel sorry for yourself, or get off your ass and try to figure out what you're going to do to make it all better, and do what you can. That's what we did, you know. Then 17 months later, we got told we'll have to take out half of Alex's brain. So, okay, I'm 27 years old. My 17-month-old is going to have to remove half his brain. How the heck do you do that? And where do you go? Yeah, so went up to Minnesota, talked to the University of Minnesota folks, and they said, oh yeah, we're coming back in. This is what we're doing. Okay, great. Stop the seizures. Here we go. You know, so had a good chunk of time where he was normal for him, I guess is the best way to put it. He was never a normal kid. You know, he always had his hemiplegia, but he was growing, he was learning, he was talking. You know, we always took the standpoint with the teachers, throw everything at him. You never know what he's going to catch. And it worked great. And then as we went along, things were great. No seizures. At 15, they came back again. So here we go. Another curveball. Found out at that point he had tuberous sclerosis, finally had a diagnosis all these years later. So we worked with that. And then while he was at a program. A young gentleman who shouldn't have been in charge of the program, we won't talk about which one or what it was, he had to go to the bathroom, and the young guy opened up the bathroom at Wendy's, let him go in with his wheelchair and said, go to the bathroom by yourself. Now, he's got a cane, he's got a wheelchair, he can't move his left arm, he can't do anything. So he got out of the wheelchair. We don't know how many times he hit or where he hit, but he hit the sink, he hit the toilet, he hit the floor. He came back, he had a concussion, we found out, and he stayed in that concussed state for 2 years. He didn't talk to us. He didn't have emotion other than anger. The doctors weren't sure what was going to happen. Their best guess was because it was half a brain, that the elastic nerves in the brain got stretched and pulled back, which caused problems with the connections and everything else. So we dealt with 2 years of that. And just as he was coming out of that, my mom was diagnosed with hepatitis C. My dad had Alzheimer's and stuff going on, and they both passed away just as he was coming out. So they at least saw him coming out, but didn't see him the normal way. So, we've been thrown curves, but you just keep moving. You just keep dealing with what you can, talking things out as you go. Thank God we've always been we've been lucky 90% of the time. If I'm low, Joelle's high. If Joelle's low, I'm high. So that really helps us. We've developed an easy partnership where we can look at each other and go, I can't handle him. I'm going for a walk. You got him. I'm sorry. That's how we go. But, so I've lost a lot of normalcy. I've lost a lot of things. I've had many deaths as life goes on. And maybe that's why Jason, my youngest guy, has decided to be a grief and loss counselor with a trauma certificate, because he's seen what we've gone through and come out of it, and he's done okay. So I think that's it after all that.
Tony, thanks for sharing. You give the new meaning to the word odyssey.
Yes, it's true.
It's quite a journey that you've been on, and I appreciate what I might refer to as tag team approach that you and Janelle have had. One's up, one's down, and this mutual respect that you have for one another when the need is there. So thanks for sharing. Eric, back to you.
Yeah, so I think that I envisioned, a life where, like any of us, where my child would be able to, make friends and be able to have conversations with her peers and be able to do the basics and want to, if there was a desire to learn how to play an instrument. Joe, you mentioned music being really important, and that is for us. And thankfully, vocally, it's neat to see some singing occur. But yeah, she's just, God bless her, but she's just really bad thus far anyway, at kind of all things instrumental, and she's trying her best. But the things that I just never would have thought of, like that I'd be able to read her handwriting, or that she would not have accidents, that she'd be able to, by the age of 9, change her own clothes, be able to take a shower, be able to, speak in full sentences in such a way that, I think too, just financially, like I never, my wife's a therapist, and I was in ministry. I was a pastor right out of college. And I sort of assumed that I could do that and the kind of things that would have us make enough money to, make it work, but that we wouldn't. It just, the whole idea of massive medical expenses just never occurred to me. So 7 months into marriage, my wife was driving and had to pull over because she just couldn't see anything. And we found out she had type 1 diabetes. And then and then I ended up coming down with some mental health issues about a decade ago, and then my daughter about 6 years ago. And so just between the three of us, I was just summarizing 2020 medical expenses just from an accounting perspective, and getting over to my accountant and just realizing like, I shouldn't laugh because it's my way of trying to not deal with it, but I just never thought that. So I think that's a big piece. We did for the first time do a family trip. It's not a vacation because it wasn't fun much of the time, but I will call it a trip. We drove down to the Smoky Mountains and got away and got to see some beauty. And it was neat. I think I pictured being able to do more fun things, but my daughter is incredibly anxious, and so she'll be screaming in public spaces, or flailing her arms around, or yelling, or just driving us insane in the car, asking the same questions over and over and over, making weird sounds and squeaks. And I guess, and I hate that I use this language, and this is a big part, if not the biggest part of my grieving, is I never envisioned having a child that would be so difficult to love this early on. Like, I knew it would be possible my kids would get into, kids would get into drugs or sex or other things that were just, that I did my best, but where they denied Jesus and they said, I hate God, or I don't know, I hate you, or any of these things. But just between the ages of 4 and 9, I just never thought I would have a kid who could be annoying to this level, could be just so off the charts. And not in the way that kids are annoying that age, but in the way that the Chinese water torture is annoying, of, at least as far as I understand it, of things over and over and over and over and over and over and never ending. And so I have a very, very difficult time loving my daughter. And I never pictured that would be a thing. And that I feel a lot of resentment toward her. We don't have the money we want to have to put toward the boys because it's all toward her. And then we put all this money, and is there really growth going on? Who's to know? I don't want to be the parent who didn't put money toward helping their kid develop, because I would feel horrible. But I realize as I'm doing that, we say no, literally or figuratively, to so many things for the boys. So, and that makes me angry, because it's like, just because they're neurotypical with a developmentally delayed autistic, ADHD, anxiety-ridden sister, shouldn't mean they should get shit on, because of all of that stuff. So they all have better attitudes than I do, though. So they set an example for me, my sons. I have an amazing wife, and I'm thankful. But yeah, it's been really hard on our marriage. We're about 18, 19 years in, and are just needing to do a lot of hard work. And so, John, when you talk about divorce there, I feel for you. I don't know what it is to be there, but I feel so close to that sometimes, and just wonder, keeping it together is hard enough as it is. So anyway, I'll leave it be there.
Eric, thanks for sharing. If it helps, my wife and I, after 37 years of marriage, have come to the conclusion, not recently, but years ago, that when you go someplace with your family or your children, that is a trip. And when the two of you go someplace by yourselves, that is a vacation. And you touched on some really important issues, and I'll just pick one out, which has to do with the resources, right? And how a disproportionate amount of the resources can go toward the child, if there is one child with needs, maybe at the detriment of the others. And I think that's a critical issue that warrants attention. And you're raising 3 children, not just one. And I think that you somehow have to reconcile that. So I really appreciate your authenticity and just speaking very openly about your feelings and some of the concerns you have. So again, thanks for sharing. Jeff, back to you.
Okay, I'm going to try to be brief. First, I just want to say I'm blown away at listening to the fellas. You know, I tell people every day how God has blessed me, my family, my son, and we have an incredible life. Obviously, not what we had planned, but as I listen to the fellas, I telling people how I've been blessed and realizing now that I am so blessed. We are so blessed. And one of the fellows, and I'm not good with names, but you talk about God being in control, or God, you know, handling things, and it's obvious in our life that that's where we're at. I'll just real quick, 24 years ago, we had an ultrasound done. Michelle was 15 weeks pregnant. Daniel was diagnosed with the encephalocele, which is what he was born with. 3 years later, we brought Daniel home with a terminal diagnosis and with hospice. The nurse that came in, we was told that Daniel would have a couple months to live. And so now, 20 years later, Daniel is still here with us. My career plan back 24 years ago would have actually, at this point, I would be a multimillionaire, and I wouldn't be working. But I told Michelle at the time that Daniel was diagnosed, that whatever I needed to do as a provider in the home, I would do. And so my career changed drastically, and I would never trade that in a million years for the life that I have now. Daniel we stopped counting surgical procedures at about 100. So in 23 years, probably close to 150 surgical procedures, some of them very, very, very dangerous. But God has brought him through that. Daniel's will to live is something that I just cannot even comprehend on any level. It amazes me every time that he comes out of the OR, every time we go back to recovery, every time he opens his eyes again. It's amazing. And we're actually celebrating right now this week. 3 years ago, he got a terrible virus that kept him in the PICU for about 36 days, and on and off the ventilator twice, almost died 4 times. And so 3 years after that time, he is still with us, probably healthier than he was prior to going in to the hospital 3 years ago. So yeah, life is a lot different than what I had planned. But believe me, I'm a better man. My wife is a better woman. My oldest son, Michael, is a better young man. He's in school to become a physical therapist. And so we are blessed. And when I get off of here tonight, I'm going to be praying for some fellows. I can tell you that. I would, of course, ask for your prayers for my family also. But it's incredible. One of the fellows earlier just talking about I can't even, I don't want to take any more time up. Thank you. Awesome.
Jeff, thanks for sharing. What I'm coming to realize that this topic is so broad and it's so multifaceted, it does not lend itself to having brief soundbite conversation. So I appreciate you all who've shared so far and the comments to come. Randy, did you want to share some of your thoughts as well?
I, like Jeff, am just totally blown away by what everybody shares. And, you know, I hadn't thought about it in a long time. I have a 30-year-old daughter, and we spent about 2 years when she was 5 through 7 dealing with epilepsy and whatever else. And I was totally inept at dealing with that. And so it's nothing compared to what all of you have gone through. And wisdom comes late in life. And I've had cancer 4 times, and I should have been dead a long time ago. My twin sister died of a heart attack 5 years ago. And all of her friends said, you know, she was so worried about you dying that, lo and behold, anxiety and worry, I think, precipitated that. So I've adapted the gratitude is everything, and your attitude is everything. And that's certainly been demonstrated by everything that all of you have said. And as Jeff says, you know, we're just so blessed if we can realize that. And yeah, it's amazing. So thank you for all. You're an inspiration. And in other conversations that I have with people, you know, just bringing up some of the things that I've heard on the Dad's Network. And, you know, because that's all of our biggest problems. We all think we're going to fix things. And lo and behold, life shows us that we can't fix things. We just have to show up every day, do the best job we can, and build everybody else up and keep them hopeful and faithful. And that's certainly what we hear from all of you. So God bless you and keep it up, and you'll be in my prayers. So thank you. And thank
Randy,
you for all that you do, Dave.
Randy, thanks for sharing. A lot of pearls of wisdom there. Lyle, you slipped in. If you want to take a moment to introduce yourself. The question that the fellows have been addressing is, what was the life you anticipated, and what's been the biggest challenge as it relates to the grief? Which stage has been the most difficult for you?
My name's Lyle Liechty. Live in Carmel, Indiana, south side of Indy. And so we have 3 children. Christopher's 28. Caroline's sitting here. She's 25. She's a person with Down syndrome. And then Claire's 22. Well, I guess the life I anticipated is really somewhat changed, but I tried not to let it change too much. But I'd say just adjust the first few years. I took care of her I did all of her doctor appointments and therapies. And then my wife was pretty upset, mad at God and all that kind of stuff. And then thought she did something wrong. And then let's see. One of the hardest parts was just I'd get angry at people that would stare for several years. And then she was about excuse me. Well, when she was born, she had a hole in her heart. So then we had to get Riley wanted to weigh a weight to do open heart surgery. And then that went well. The next day, they were pulling her right atrial appendage out, and then they so that's a common thing they pull out, and it's supposed to just clot, but it didn't clot. So I was standing outside there, and since I was in healthcare, I knew what was going on. So they took us in and said, you have two choices. You can either have us go back in, or you can pray that the blood clots. So we just said, go back in. And so they saved her at Riley. And then after that, she started thriving. She walked at age 20. I don't know, like 2.5. Yeah, something like that. And then the next hardest part was getting potty trained when she was 7. And then I think it was just hard because I was the one who embraced it and my wife didn't. So that just caused a lot of stress in the marriage. And then, there's always extra medical bills, but we got used to that. And then a lot of good things came up. We met a lot of great people through the Down Syndrome Indiana, and started Dad's group that's all over the country now. And I met a lot of people at our church, Second Presbyterian Church, that I would have met because they would show up at the hospital for us. The first 2 weeks she was at Riley. And then, I've met all kind of great people because of organizations I've either started or helped start or been involved with. And my kids they all get along well. Claire's my youngest, she's 22. She's in grad school to be a recreational therapist. And then Christopher's 28, and he's trying to figure out what to do. He's got his bachelor's, but he's now trying to figure out what he might go back and be an art teacher for elementary kids. And Caroline's real active and healthy and fun. And the worst part is our marriage really never got back to where we both wanted it to be because of differences of opinion on how I have high expectations. She doesn't really have those expectations, so we don't agree on things. And the kids, Christopher and Claire, told us a couple years ago that the stress they have as young adults is because of our arguing over the years, and we didn't even know that. So they were Christopher was out of college, and then Claire just graduated in May, so that made us feel really bad. So Christopher deals with it differently. He's not him and my wife don't have a really good relationship right now. And my Claire is really great. She went to counseling and she just doesn't, she doesn't take any sides or anything. She's really just she's a wonderful. So the only thing that bothers me is that we still don't have that balance because, for example, they went to Destin, Florida last Thursday night with her sister and one of her sisters and my niece. They drove down Thursday night for a week, and my wife wouldn't take Caroline because it's too much work, which is bullshit because she's just like anybody else. And Claire would have made sure everything was taken care of. But so, this week I'm trying to work in, make sure Caroline's busy during the day. So, I'm not going to complain. It's just, I just try to have a good attitude and think that, somebody else needs more than we do. And, my biggest concern is I want to live really long because I don't know what's going to happen because she's she's a daddy's girl. So I don't know, everything's set for her financially and the kids, but I don't want them to feel like they're going to have to take care of everything. So I don't know. We all have really long stories you could write books on, but that's about all I've got for tonight.
Well, Lyle, thanks for speaking from the heart. And I've interviewed a lot of dads. I've gotten to know hundreds and hundreds of dads raising children with special needs. And you would be somebody that I consider a poster child for the level of commitment you've made to your daughter. That's not taking anything away from anybody else, but it's remarkable, right? The commitment you've made, and I know how close you are to Caroline. So again, thanks for speaking from the heart. What I'd like to do is call an audible. We could talk for hours. I just feel it, but I'm a little bit anxious about the time. So what I'd like to do is just go around, call it a lightning round. If you could try to limit your thoughts, if you want to share a final thought, to no more than 1 minute or so. And the question I wanted to ask had to do with, have you gone through counseling or therapy? And if there's any advice or resources that you can offer to our listeners. So starting at the top, Scott, you're up first.
No, never gone to therapy. I just talk it out with family and friends most of the time, and that have like situations, like mentoring, kind of like we're doing. Again, resources, I've seen a lot of them, but I always tell people, get on our website, listen to the podcast. There's so much information there. And if you need something, tell me and we'll help you find it. That's it.
Thank you, Scott. John, back to you.
Yeah, and I will say that I'm definitely an advocate for counseling. We have done it in our marriage, and although I am a product of divorce now, I would tell you that good counseling definitely helped us for a long time and for many years. And I've done counseling myself personally, both before and after the divorce, and I've have a lot of friends personally in that field as well. There are lots of good resources out there, too many to name right now. I'll echo Scott. If anybody's interested in reaching out to me, again, put me in the Google machine. You can find my website. I'm happy to speak with you, connect with you. I have lots of resources in the Chicago area and in other parts of the country as well. So feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to help.
Okay, we'll be sure to check the Google machine. Joe, back to you.
And put it in the Google engine. Yeah, so so many things. Yes, I did go to counseling. I went to, I'd say, somewhat of a poor counselor to begin with. Honestly, put it this way, if we say we're Christians, let's go to Christian counseling, or it's called biblical counseling is what I found. It's actually the ACBC. Sorry, I've got it sitting right here. Anyway, I'll send you the website to it. But ACBC, it's like something accredited biblical counselors. Jay Adams has a lot of great books, but obviously I'm reading the Bible a ton and just pulling stuff out of there. We talk about the Holy Spirit. He's the wonderful counselor, right? So counseling is not a bad thing in a sense. He's the counselor. So, but I had a couple of bullets, man, and 30 seconds. We're talking about sanctification here, right? Sanctification is like removing the impurities out of us. And so as life goes on, right, we're going through grief, we're going through all these struggles and stuff. All these impurities are being removed. And so it's painful stuff, but I think that's what we're seeing a lot of is you only grow when you're sanctified or being made more pure, being able to love more purely. And so, and I also had here, the big thing was control. Things are out of control and we can't help it. Like Randy, I think, was saying, we try to fix things, especially as being a carpenter. If something's broke, I can fix it. I can glue it back together, bolt it, whatever. But inside here, it's hard to fix things. And in here in the heart, and also, getting a child's mouth to talk and move, that's out of my, we can go to speech therapists and things and do whatever we can for them. But ultimately, it's all part of God's plan. And anyway, I've got other notes, but I know we're flying through here. So
Thanks for sharing, Joe. Really appreciate it. Jeff, back to you.
Joe, I like you. Man, I wish I'd have had your insight at your age. Just real quick, God is my savior and he's my friend. I didn't have dads to go to. And until this group, really over the last 23 years, I can't think of a dad that I've encountered that I've been able to, sit down and talk with on any deep level. So I go to God a lot. I hope he doesn't get tired of listening to me. But he has helped me through many, many things. And just real quick, and I don't want to get real deep on it, but guys, we don't need to fix things if we accept, and I'm not saying to accept without trying to help out our children, but if we accept our children the way that they are, and at the same time strive to help them achieve whatever they can achieve, I think frustration levels maybe not be so big and so difficult to deal with. I told David last time we talked, we put no limitations on Daniel, because no one thought Daniel was going to live before he was born. So for him to be born was a gigantic achievement. Beyond that, we don't put limitations on him, and we are so thankful for whatever he accomplishes. So I think just perspective is a big thing. I'm thankful for every second, because in this house, we live by seconds, minutes, and hours. Daniel could be gone when I leave this room to go in to see him in the living room with my wife. So I rejoice in every minute. And that's it. Thank you.
Jeff, thanks for sharing. And I just want to give Scott's wife, Sharon, a call out, because I've met her. He talks about her often. And she thinks Gloria is just perfect the way she is, right? And I think that's partly, the view of a mom who is more likely to provide her unconditional love to a child. And what a great role model that is. So Scott, you married up. We'll leave it at that.
She told me that, someone came up to her and said, well, what is wrong with Gloria? And she looked at her and said, nothing. Why? She keeps saying Gloria is perfectly Gloria. And there's nothing wrong with her. She's fine. And when you think about that, we all have needs, right? Some are just more special than others. The message of my movie, by the way.
Scott, thanks for sharing. Tony, back to you.
Yeah, no, never been to counseling, been lucky enough to be able to work things out with Joelle as long as we've been together. And way back when, 30 years ago, there wasn't a whole lot, like you said, a lot of guys to talk to, a lot of stuff going on. I was one of the few dads at the doctor's offices and a few dads at therapy, and there just wasn't there. But now that we're more active with Special Olympics, I meet a few people there, talk things out, just deal with it. John, you've been wonderful since we have started talking and been together. It's just letting it go, dealing with it day by day, and not being afraid to say when things are bad and be happy when things are good. Never fails. When I get the lowest, Alex looks at me and goes, "You're the best, Dad." Well, that's it. I'm in tears. I leave. That's it. So that's about it for me.
Tony, thanks for sharing. Whenever I hear somebody say that, when the child expresses their love for you sort of out of the blue sometimes, you almost think that God is speaking to you, right? That's what comes to mind. So Eric, back to you.
Yeah, my wife and I have both done individual as well as couples therapy and counseling along the way. I mean, my wife is a therapist, so she definitely has a bent toward that. And I think I did probably from early on as well, just from a lot of the influence of my mother in my growing up years, and a lot of her kind of focus as well. So but I would say in terms of, specifically getting, help as relates to being a parent of a kid with special needs, there's this woman in the northern suburbs somewhere. Her name is Amy Slutsky. Not the most becoming last name, but I don't know if anyone has heard of her, but she met with my wife and I for about 8 to 10, and John is giving a thumbs up. So anyway, I really liked her, and I even may kind of circle back around with her in the future as we have needs, but that's just the one name that comes up in my mind. She's a great advocate too when it comes to school for those of us who still have, school age children, which I think is maybe the minority of us, 3 of us perhaps. But yeah, I'll just put that out there.
Erica, thanks for sharing. Appreciated. Randy, back to you.
In my earlier days, I tried therapy, but I was too arrogant to believe that I needed it. So, lacking wisdom, that it wasn't too beneficial. And so, the second or third time I got cancer, that I finally realized that there's a lot more to be gained by talking to fellow patients than a lot of times to doctors and nurses and the rest of that. So I became a big advocate for talking to the patients and their spouses and everybody else. And I've kind of come to the gratitude and forgiveness is most important. And also, I used to spend all the time trying to be right. And now I spend all the time trying to stay in relationship with people. And I guess that's the wisdom of what comes with this. And so, yeah, I think there's benefits to counseling, but obviously the mentorship from, groups, and other men like yourselves, I think has more value than pretty much anything else, because you've got instant credibility because you've been there. And especially when you share, honestly and authentically and from the heart. And again, it just tears you up to hear the stories, and with so much gratitude for what you folks have been through. It's just incredible. So I will spend more time praying for everyone. So the one thing that I came away with is I didn't have a disabled children, but I was disabled. So raising myself has been the biggest challenge. So I came to it late in life. So thank you.
Thanks for sharing, Randy. Never say never. Lyle, you're going to have the last word. Back to you.
Oh yeah, we went to counseling pretty early on to deal with Susan's anger and just us not knowing what to expect. Went to see Dr. Schreiner. He was chief of pediatrics at Riley because he has a daughter with Down syndrome who was probably about 7 years older. So that helped us kind of get a vision. Back then we didn't know much or didn't know anything. And then I went to counseling for a year, and then I think we went later in life. And then about a year ago, I went. She was supposed to go, but then she canceled last minute. And then we went a few months ago after the third. Well, I went alone. Then she came the last 2, and then she said, "This, this is worth it because we've already been told what we have to do." So I think counseling is good if you listen to the counselor and do what they tell you to do, because they're trying to help you to whatever your issues are. And then because they know what they're doing. And we use, our church has a big center for counseling, so they're really good. But the other part is talking to other people at church who get to know you and know, those people are real valuable. So, and then just in different dads groups or groups in general. So yeah, I think there's a value. You just have to get the right counselors. And I'd say if you're a Christian, you probably want to get a Christian counselor. Yeah. My daughter went to counseling a few times at the end of her senior year at IU. And then my son's been to counseling to deal with anxiety, but that was to deal with other things. But I think they're all, if you get good ones, they can really help. Thanks.
Lyle, thanks for sharing. Just want to say thank you to everyone for being so open and honest and transparent about your situation. This has been a very interesting and enlightening conversation for so many different reasons. This topic of grieving the life that you anticipated is not, limited to the special needs community whatsoever. Like I'd indicated in my opening remarks, there's a lot of different reasons that people can be grieving, whether it's from disability, disease, injury, loss of a spouse or a child or a loved one, or divorce, like a couple of you have talked about. And this has been another successful episode of the Special Fathers Network bi-weekly Zoom calls. For those that are interested, there'll be resources that you can scroll below. And I'm hoping that you'll tune in to one or more of the podcasts, as well as go back and look through the archive of bi-weekly Zoom calls on topics that you might find of interest. That's it for tonight. Thanks again, guys.